人民币的汇率
the RMB exchange rate. This is an economic issue, and as such, it must not be politicized.
That was China's Premier Wen Jiabao with some tough talk last night, saying that allowing the yuan to appreciate by 20 to 40%, as some would demand, would lead to social instability in China, bankrupt Chinese companies, and have the result of massive layoffs. As we've said, President Obama and Jiabao are about to talk about just this among some other trade issues, but the president's still wrapping up with his earlier address at the United Nations. So if you're wondering what's actually going to be happening when they get face to face, let's see if Bill Reinsch, president of the National Foreign Trade Council, also former Undersecretary of Commerce for Bill Clinton, he might have some answers for us. So, Bill, you know, some China watchers say the president's going to walk into that room and try to twist arms here to get more beneficial trade policy towards the U.S., but perhaps he's twisting the wrong arm. He should be talking more about global cooperation on this issue.
Well, that's a good point. I think, frankly, the first thing he'll talk about is what he always talks about first, which are security issues. North Korea, Iran, Pakistan. This administration has put them at the top of their list with China all the time, and so I think that will be there. Obviously, trade will come up, currency will come up. Currency really is a multilateral problem, and you're quite right. It ought to be a G-20 issue. It ought to be an IMF issue, and that's where he ought to be focused.
Well, Wen Jiabao, in those comments that he made to business leaders and so many here in New York last night, he seemed to have some pretty tough words there and bringing it home to say this isn't just us sort of playing with things to happen in our favor. Our own monetary policy, our own social progress would be hurt by allowing the currency to appreciate. How accurate is what he said?
Well, I think he's grossly exaggerated, and it went up 20% a few years ago, and you know this Chinese economy seems to have survived, is doing quite well.
It took 3 years to get there, though, right?
It took a long time to get there, and if he was talking about an overnight thing, sure, the immediate shock would be greater. But I think you can't find very many economists, including Chinese economists, who won't tell you that the RMB is undervalued.
Right.
And it needs to go back up. Now, from an American standpoint, whether that'll do any good in terms of the deficit is a different question. It'll be good for China if it goes back up. The economy needs to be rebalanced, and they need to do it to deal with inflation, which is a growing problem, and to deal with the bubbles that are looming in their economy.
Well, as you know, this international issue's been, political fodder in Washington. If the House does pass any kind of bill slapping some sort of policy on China as punishment for not moving faster, what implication would that have?
Well, depends on for whom. The Chinese, I think, would certainly retaliate. They always do. They've said as much, certainly privately. And so that's not an excuse not to do anything, but it's certainly something that we ought to be aware of and prepared for. I don't think that it will have that great an impact, frankly, in the short term on the American economy. This issue is a proxy for the overall U.S.-China relationship. If you talk to my members that are large multinational companies, their problems with China have more to do with indigenous innovation,
right,
forced technology transfer, standards barriers, restrictions on investment, a whole host of issues designed to keep them out or keep them disadvantaged in the economy. Currency is not that high on their list.
Right, so this 2% move that we've seen recently, or 20% like we saw last time, isn't the key focus for them. Thank you very much, Bill. We have to leave it there, unfortunately. But thank you for joining us.